It's now 7 o'clock, so I will call a meeting of the April meeting of the Winona County Planning Commission to order. We will begin with the flag pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Commission, anyone have anything to say about the agenda, or would someone care to make a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The agenda is approved. Approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to read them? Anyone find any glaring errors?
I make motion to approve.
Arlie makes the motion to approve. Mark seconds it. Okay, all those in favor of approval of the March 15th minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The minutes are passed as written. Okay, at this time, we will go into the petitions, and we have a larger audience than we had the last 2 months, and so I will go over the order of how we do these dockets. First, I will read off the title of the docket, then we'll have a staff summary, then we will have an opportunity for the petitioner to speak on his behalf. Then we will have a public hearing, at which time all of you in the audience may step forward, say your name, address, and any comment you'd like to make. And as long as you don't get profane, we'll let you say anything you want to. And then we close the public hearing, and then the commission discusses amongst ourselves whether we're for or against approval, and then we will vote on it. And at that time, the docket is over for the planning commission. Did I say that satisfactory? Okay. Let's go to docket number 4/1918-01. Go ahead.
Thank you. So we have the petition from Severson Oil Company and Great River Land Investment, who currently have a sale that is conditional based on approval of this conditional use permit request for a new propane bulk storage facility. The site is situated right along County Road 12 and Gopher Road at the intersection there, right off of the I-90 interchange from Highway 43. And it's directly west of the existing FedEx site and adjacent from the Peterbilt site that is now vacant. So looking at the zoning districts here, the site is mostly surrounded by ag use to the north and west, but there is some of the business and recreational zoning district to the south, and it is itself within the community development district too, which was kind of created to allow some of these more commercial or industrial type uses in these areas that were chosen because of their access to different highway networks. So the facility is proposed to be 45,000 gallons of propane storage, and then they also have a building here that's proposed just northeast of the propane tank that they're going to use to store some equipment on the site that will meet all of the applicable setbacks, and they'll need to submit a development certificate for all of that. The nearest dwelling is 500 feet to the west of the site. across Gopher Road on the north side of County Road 12. And they're proposing to meet the axle restrictions on Gopher Road. They're going to enter off of County Road 12, which has higher axle weights, and then they're going to offload, and then once they're offloaded, they'll be light enough to drive on Gopher Road any time of year, because there was some concern from Dave Kramer at the Highway Department originally based on their axle weights. But with this new plan of an entrance and an exit, Dave was okay with it, and he indicated that he didn't see anything at this point that would stop him from approving, but he hasn't done a full review either. And here's kind of a video of the site. So I'm facing south right now towards Highway 43 and I-90 along County Road 12, and I'll turn to the east and you'll see the Peterbilt building and then FedEx following, and the propane tank will be right there kind of in the front of my site there. And then we'll come back to the north off Gopher Road, and you can see the neighbor's dwelling there that is more than 500 feet, and then there's the one here to the west that you'll see that is 500 feet away from the site. And then we'll spin back to face Highway 43 facing south, and just give you a better view of how far away that house is. And that's all I have, and thank you. I'll take any questions at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, does anyone in the commission have any questions? Mark?
Question, you said enter and exit, but some of the trucks coming in will be full and some of the trucks going out will be full. So you're saying,
Yep, what was proposed was that it was going to be an entrance off County Road. Maybe they'll flip that if they come in empty and then they'll exit once they're fully loaded onto County Road 12. That is a possibility. But I think essentially the empty trucks are going to come in off of Gopher Road, and the fully loaded trucks are going to go directly onto County Road 12 to avoid those axle weight restrictions. But you can ask the petitioner. He might be able to clarify that better than I can.
Anyone else?
It'd be the local delivery trucks that'll exiting fall, I think, rather than a semi. So.
Are they gonna have their own driveway personal for that, their own private
Yep,
driveway?
they'll have their own driveway for the offloading and everything off of the existing county and township roads, so they'll have a staging area on their own property. They're just using these existing roads to enter and exit the site. And they are entering into an agreement with the township to share costs of gravel and maintenance on Gopher Road up to their entry point or exit point, whichever way they use it.
Anyone else? Harley, you got a question? Or?
Go.
Okay, you're just exercising your hand.
I was just waving.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just waving to you, Gene.
All right. Now, does anyone representing the owners wish to speak at this time? Yeah.
My name is Josh Severson, and just want to thank you guys for allowing me to come forward with this petition. The purpose of this is to increase our storage. Back in 2013, you might have heard the Cochin pipeline coming from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico was reversed, which was a major supply point for propane into the region. And since then, we've added storage. Over the last, several years here, we've put in 90,000 gallons between Cochrane, Utica, and Winona. And part of the reason for this is to have some additional storage in the times when supply gets tight and we can't get more propane. And also it's, for efficiencies for us as well, being that we have 3 drivers that come into this region in particular, kind of a middle point for 3 different routes, so we'd have 3 different guys filling off of that. Kind of in reference to your question with the trucks coming in and out, so our short trucks would be coming in unloaded on Gopher Road, and then they would load at the facility and then come out on County Road 12, and then the transports would be coming in off of 12, unloading into the tank, and then coming back out on Gopher Road. I know that there's been some comments about safety. You know, there's a lot of redundancies that are built into these tanks and these tank systems. And it's something that we take very seriously, safety. And our drivers, you know, they're continually, you know, monitoring things as they're loading and unloading at the site. What else was as far as like lighting goes, you know, we probably have some LED lighting over the fill points, and then, you know, if we put a building up there, you know, we'd have it probably in front of the doors as well, which LED lighting is more of a directional lighting, so it's, you know, a little softer as far as light pollution goes. There was reference in the recommendations to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Propane actually does not fall under Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's governing authority. It would actually come down to more the state, local, and national fire department. And there's several pamphlets out there, actually pamphlet 30, 58, and 70, which provide all sorts of guidelines that we need to adhere by when we put these tanks in at different locations. I think that's kind of the gist. I think we all got the letter here that I sent over this morning, but I'd be open up any questions you might have for me.
Okay, Chris?
I do have a couple questions.
Okay.
So, in the supplemental information that you gave, there's a little bit about some fusible link that melts, that's a fire prevention sort of component. I was wondering if you could just talk about the fire prevention stuff that's associated with the tank. Just describe it to me, to help me understand how it works.
You know, I might, Don, you want to? Don's our operations
Great.
manager, and he's a little more technical than I. he might be able to explain it a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm Don Schrock. I'm operations manager with Severson's. And your questions, the reference in there is that all the openings, or I'm sorry, all the shutouts on the equipment are normally closed. While we're loading or unloading, there's everything's opened up again. They're held open by a cable, and that cable's goes to a remote location that a driver can just simply pull it and everything shuts. In the event that there was, unlikely event that there was a fire, each one of those shutoffs has a fusible link in it. That melts at 117 degrees, which isn't real hot. When that melts, it shuts everything off again automatically. I don't know if you'd call that fire suppression but that's what the reference means.
Okay. Okay, Chris, one more question.
Yeah, one more. So is this an example of, this picture, this is sort of an example of what the ground around the tank is going to look like?
Yeah, that would be, sort of what it would look like. There's, part of, the code with, installing these tanks, you can't have anything growing underneath the tank because it becomes, a fire hazard. The one thing missing in this picture, this is a picture of an installation we did in Cochrane, and it's not the completed installation, but the fencing around the bulkhead, the fill points and the point where they unload at, that's a requirement that we have to have fencing around there that's locked. So that would be probably about the only thing.
And the part that I was thinking about when I asked the question, I saw that Soil and Water made a comment about stormwater runoff, but it doesn't appear to me like there'd be any poured concrete impermeable surface on the lot, and that's really what I was trying to understand.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and there wouldn't, we're not intending to pour any concrete. I know, talking with them, it sounded like gravel roads are kind of counted as impermeable as well, so that's kind of where some of that reference came.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else have any questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we need a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll move.
Chris moves,
I'll second.
Kelly seconds. All those in favor of opening the public hearing on docket 419-18-01, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The public hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to speak, please step forward, state your name and address.
Hi there. My name is Josh Murphy. I live at 26920 Gopher Road. I did submit a letter because I wasn't sure I'd be able to be here tonight. I had to take off of work to make it. So initially I intended on just reading the letter, but in an effort to reduce redundancy, since I've written this letter, I got an opportunity to look at the site plan and the application, did a little more research. So rather than just reading the letter that you've already got, I was going to touch on some additional things that aren't in it, if that's okay with you. So the letter's broken down into points, numerical points. Point number 2 is an issue that I have with the trucks being on the gravel Gopher Road. In addition to what I have written here, since I wrote this, I learned that Severson has agreed to share the cost of gravel on the road. I spoke with the petitioner in advance of the meeting, and I learned that there is no deal in place, there's no dollar amount in place, there's no percentage of the cost in place. It was just a general agreement, verbal agreement that they would share the cost of the road, of the gravel for the road. In addition to that, sharing the cost of the gravel of the road does not reduce or prevent or repair damage to the road from the trucks. All that means to me, in my understanding of their deal, is that the gravel that gets rutted or misplaced by the commercial trucks operating on it is going to be paid for by Seversons. It won't prevent any damage to the road. Beyond that, number 6, in the zoning, or excuse me, in the Winona County comp plan, I just have a small addition here that I don't believe the addition of a 45,000 gallon bulk propane tank is accurately reflects the existing development that's already at that intersection. There's no tanks remotely that size there, and the businesses that are there, the 2 businesses that are there, the focal point of those properties is the business itself. Any tanks, storage liquid tanks that are there currently are significantly smaller, somewhat screened, and just, or not outright visible to the public. So I don't think the addition of a large bulk propane tank accurately reflects the existing development, which is mentioned in the Winona County comp plan. And then number 8, number 7. Number 7, a CD2 zone, intense or heavy industrial use, is prohibited in a CD2 zone. Now, I don't think they're estimating an average of 22 trucks total per month. I don't think that in and of itself is heavy or intense. But what I think makes it heavy or intense is the fact that those trucks are all hauling hazardous materials, propane, in and out of a 1-lane gravel road. And then number 8 is probably the bigger concern I have. I recognize that it's, with redundant safety features, it may be unlikely, but I have a safety concern for this proposal. The emergency response guidebook, which is used for determining how to respond to hazardous material events, incidents, has a recommended minimum evacuation distance for a fire involving that tank that size of 5,600 feet, just over a mile. My home is within that area, and there's several other homes that are within that area. With that said, the placement of the tank and where I live, with dead-end gravel, Gopher Road being a dead-end gravel road, my family and I have no way of evacuating if there were a fire involving this tank, because our evacuation route would take us directly past the burning tank. In addition to that, it's not in the letter, but the minimum evacuation distance for a large or small spill is 330 feet, which would include the head or the beginning of Gopher Road at the intersection of County 12, which again would not allow us to leave that area, and a half a mile in the event of a spill downwind, which my house is within a half mile of where this tank is going to be, again preventing us from being able to evacuate in the event of an emergency. In addition to that, if there's a south-blowing wind or if there's a fire involving the tank, that evacuation zone would also include Interstate 90 and Highway 43, which would have a major effect on commerce and transit in Winona County. It would shut down both highways, require the shutdown of both highways. A tank this size involving a fire, according to the emergency response guidebook, would require over 935 gallons of water applied per minute, which is impossible for a rural fire department without a municipal water supply. I did speak to the assistant chief of the Lewiston Fire Department, who is responsible for that area, and I asked him if they would be capable of that kind of a water flow, and he told me they would not. They cannot. And I recognize that Severson has a number of safety precautions and redundant safety precautions that are going into the installation of a tank this size, but they have not and they cannot make a promise that there won't be an emergency involving the tank. Even with safety precautions in place, there still are tanks that start on fire of every size. There still are leaks and there still are explosions involving tanks, propane tanks, safety precautions aside. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh,
Yes,
go
sir.
ahead. Don.
You alluded to something about 330 feet. What was that?
330 feet is, according to the emergency response guidebook, is the initial isolation distance for a leak involving propane.
According to what?
The emergency response guidebook.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
How many people live you live on a dead-end road, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And how many households are there? 3?
There are 2 households on that road, and then there's DNR forest land that people use for hiking. And
then how many people live on this road?
there are 3 in my house, and then the house at the dead end has 3.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the second time, anyone wishing to speak on docket, let's see, 419-18-01, please step forward.
My name is John Botten at 27340 County Road 12. I'm the owner of the land that surrounds this property, and I've had the unfortunate opportunity to live next to FedEx for the past few years. And I've experienced some things that are not very neighborly. And I just want to express my opinions and thoughts about water control. I've experienced gullies going through my fields, and granted, it's not going to be a concreted out platform, but the land does slope towards my land. So the slope of the land would carry the water across my land. And I have no idea what those roads will do for the water patterns, but I think it should be something that should be confronted and addressed before I get gullies through my land like I did with FedEx's water. And then also, my last big gripe is snow removal. FedEx seems to want to push all their snow onto my property, and after it continuously asks them not to do it, they still do it. So I just want to address that problem as far as snow removal is concerned. That's all I have to say.
Okay, for the third time, anyone wishing to address docket 419-18-01, please step forward.
Leanne Solway, 26338 Gopher Road. So I'm the family with three at the end of the road. And I guess my problem is with the placement, it's going to be harder to see that where the intersection is, it's already it's not a square. It's angled, so it's already hard to get out. And then that tank's going to run parallel with 12. So when there's snow on the road, it's already poorly removed. And so when I have to start, I can't start at the stop sign sometimes because 43 comes, runs their snow, goes back down, leaving a big ridge. So I have to start a little further back, look, and anticipate and get through that great big huge mound that they leave. So now that tank is also going to be in my way to see. My husband and my son work at FedEx. My in-laws behind me live at the other place. Should there be an emergency evacuation or an explosion, and my husband and son are at work, and my in-laws are home, and I can't leave, can wipe out a whole family with one event. So that's another reason why I'm against it. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
Lila Solway, 26914 County Road 12. And I am going to lose my view out of my kitchen window, which probably nobody cares about but me. But I think, too, that tank in there is just a vision problem with all these roads coming together there. But you're the ones that's going to make the decision. I hope you make a good one. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Okay, Richard moved and Mark seconded the motion to close the public hearing. All those in favor of closing the public hearing on docket 419-18-01, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The public hearing is now closed. At this time, I believe anyone on the commission can ask any questions, and hopefully somebody can answer them for them. Donnie?
I'd wonder if staff had any response to any of this that would be helpful to us.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Evanson, thank you. Kate Qualley, Planning Director. One quick comment from us, and I'll let others speak. If I think the second speaker concerns about runoff into his fields, that could be handled by some landscape screening and some detention, like a small detention basin with landscape plants that are deep rooted, sometimes called rain gardens, that kind of thing. Because gravel does turn out to be more of an impervious surface, even if the cover is only 20-30%, which is less than we thought at first. So that's something that our office would be happy to work out with the petitioners, depending on the findings of the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, Kate? Does the individual that made those comments have any recourse towards the existing properties? I think the complaint had to do with the FedEx property.
Blake?
Yep.
Thanks, Blake.
Thank you. I would say that what led to the comments that Daryl had about runoff are because of past complaints that we have dealt with and he has dealt with due to runoff from the FedEx site. And I'd say the biggest difference that I see is that the FedEx site, as you can see, is nearly a 100% impervious surface. They gravelled the entire site, whereas the petitioners here have indicated that only 20% of the site is going to be covered in gravel. And they're pretty much only the areas highlighted here, and I'll walk up to the map because that'll be easier to illustrate where they're planning to gravel. So the majority of the northern part of this parcel, though, they're planning to leave as green space at this time.
Yeah. So, and part of my,
The only area that they propose to gravel is this section here, and then up to their shed and then out. The rest of it will remain green space. So that might help alleviate some of the runoff concerns, but it's still something that when we receive a development certificate that we would be looking at.
and it sounded like some of the complaints was an already existing situation that really has nothing to do with this particular conditional use permit. And does the individual have any recourse with the existing situation? That's kind of part of my question.
I guess since I've been in the department, there hasn't been a complaint about the FedEx site. Maybe Eric or Lou have some knowledge of that. I know Daryl has dealt with it though, and he's not here tonight. But one of these two.
The appropriate action would be to file a complaint.
That is correct. They would file a complaint with us, and we typically have Soil and Water do a joint site visit and take a look to see if there's rills or gullies or a runoff or a sheet flow. If that's the case, a letter of violation is usually sent to the offender suggesting that they submit plans to bring it under control. Maybe I could address the closeness to the roads and the setbacks and whatnot. The plans that we have received show that the setbacks are being met. With that in mind, I guess you might want to refer to the CD zoning district in the zoning ordinance, and this use is only allowed as a conditional use, but with that zoning district, there is also permitted uses. And if I look at section 10.73, there could be, I guess just to put this in perspective, there could be a convalescent home, a duplex, there could be public administration buildings, public and private schools, single-family residential, all allowed by a permitted use. That means if a buyer of that property wanted to propose one of these structures, all they would need to do is meet those minimum setbacks, put adequate sanitary in there as well as secure driveway permits, but they would be allowed at the same distance, and they're at the same height level, which is a 35-foot height requirement. So.
And that does not require CUP.
Correct.
Harley,
I guess I got a question for Josh, or the manager. Is there any way they could put that tank on the north side of that road? Or is there any specific reason you're putting it where you're putting it?
You mean north side?
Of their proposed road.
Yeah.
Where would you?
he means in the property, your driveway in the property now, not
So it's easier to see traffic coming on 12.
Traffic.
It's on the north.
Well, how many feet back is it? What's the setback?
It's 100 feet. Now that I'm looking at it, I see that I missed it and they submitted 65, but we discussed 100 feet from County Road 12. And that's in the staff report. With the tank.
So it is far, it meets the
100 feet
requirement.
from the center line of the road.
Okay.
And
I guess it's just, one of the persons were a little concerned with being able to see traffic as they're coming up to the stop sign. Is there a big problem if you go to the other side of that road entering there, Josh?
Oh, over to the other side?
To the north side of that driveway coming in and out?
Might make it a little more challenging. I mean, if we put it to the other side, being able to go in, unload, and come right back out. Or this, we're just kind of coming around the front side or the back side of that tank. If we move it over to the other side, I mean, you might be able to move it a little further over, maybe, and still keep that drive. I mean, that might.
My concern is somebody said it might be a little difficult with that tank being in the way to see traffic on 12.
Yeah, and part of, part of the code is, it has to be at least 50 feet from the property line. So we gotta be at least 50 feet off that property, FedEx property line too. Part of it, but yeah.
Yeah, you could go east.
Go east some?
Yeah, go east closer to the turn in our drive there, or the proposed drive. Yeah, I mean, that would be a possibility, I guess, yeah.
That would be an issue with the county highway engineer. I mean, whether he'd have any comment there or not. So, which is part of the conditional use here, right? That everything be cleared with the county highway engineer.
That's all. Thanks, Josh.
All right, thanks.
I have a quick question for Josh.
Oh, Josh.
Maybe I'm not already.
Go ahead.
I'll
get you next.
What was brought up about the evacuation route, the potential cause of evacuation, which would be a propane mishap of some variety, would also block the evacuation route of the families. This seems to me a glaring, the first thing we have to look at is that it doesn't create an excess burden. It seems an awful burden to me if I live on a dead-end road to have that dead-end road be an inaccessible evacuation route. Is that something that has come up, or?
I guess, it hasn't been something that's come up in conversation. I can understand the concern for it. I do know, the likelihood of something happening is very unlikely, but I can't guarantee, that it's not, it's possible, something, but we've never had any issues with, releases or fires or, anything in the years that we've been selling propane with any of our storage tanks.
Yeah, I just want to be, if I was a family there, though, I would be concerned. I'm going to be more concerned when I ride on Southwest. Something may never happen, but I think we'd be foolish. My opinion is we'd be foolish not to address it.
Right.
If I may interject a comment here, most of you know that I had open heart surgery a little over a year ago, and the cardiologist, when he was explaining everything to me, he said, there's a small risk of dying during surgery. He said, right now the statistics say we only have one death in every 1,598 surgeries. But he said, of course, if you happen to be the one that dies, it's an immediate impact on you.
Right.
Are you finished? Okay. Go ahead, Steve.
Two questions about, would this propane in any way, I would assume it's going to serve the agricultural community if farmers are needing to get propane for drying their crops in the fall. Will any of this propane go for that, or where does it go?
Yep, it'd be a combination, so for crop drying in the fall and then, residential as well.
With supporting the comp plan and supporting agriculture in the area, it does help to serve agriculture. My other question for you is, we're discussing the potential hazards with this large tank. Do the smaller tanks that people have by their houses, I've got a 1,000-gallon one by my house, do those possess any of those hazards, or there's no hazard with those small ones, or?
Well, there's definitely hazards with small ones as well. We, adhere to, guidelines with that as well. And there's probably not as much redundancy in those tanks as there are in these larger tanks. But there's always, things can happen to those tanks too. Things come up, but, they're smaller tanks too, I guess.
Richard.
Hey, Josh.
Yeah.
To carry on that vein, you guys have been, I'm kind of a newcomer, so you guys have probably been delivering fuel before. So how many years have you guys been filling these 500,000-gallon tanks around homes?
Since the early 90s, my dad started.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess I was around then, but anyway, it wasn't in Winona County. But what is your experience? You guys have quite a few customers. Give me some idea what the county's exposure is. You probably got 5,000 customers. I don't know, but why don't you tell us how many customers you have, roughly what the size of the tanks, and historically over the past, I guess it would be 38 years, what kind of activity had you had that we had to worry about?
We've
tanks and things like that.
We probably have about 5,000 tanks out in the field, between 500 and 1,000 gallon tanks. Those are probably 500 is probably the majority of the tanks that are out there. In regards to incidents, we've had things come up like, I think there was when we had all that rain. What was it, last fall? We had a customer's tank who ground gave out from underneath it, and then we had an issue with that where it actually tipped over and rolled down a hill.
Okay.
And that one, it did release some gas, but we were able to turn it off, at the valve safely. I guess we've had an incident on a corn dryer before where, there was a fire coming from, I think it was the heater on the corn dryer, I want to say. I can't think of any other, major...
You haven't had major explosions or, some of the...
No, that fire, was probably the most major. But then, it didn't explode or anything like that. I can't think of any others. And we perform safety inspections on these tanks too, every so many years, and take a look at the system and make sure it's holding pressure and things look good. And as the drivers are delivering, they're supposed to be inspecting the system as much as they can at that time as well. So.
Well, I've got two of those 1,000-gallon tanks, and they're a lot closer to my house than.
Yeah.
Actually, it's two different houses. So.
Yeah, and there's different regulations. Like 500-gallon tank, it's got to be at least 10 feet. 1,000, I think, is 20 feet on that.
When we say huge, this would be 45 of my tanks, or roughly 20. I don't know.
Right.
It doesn't look huge.
Yeah, and it's one tank. Essentially you have one tank, one filling system. One thing to worry about there.
All right, you answered all my questions.
Don?
The NFPA regulations would control this. National Fire Protection Association would be what governed this facility, right?
Yep. Yeah, we follow their.
Is there an NFPA permit required through a state agency that will be applicable to this?
We work with, I think it's the fire department and the state too, on the installations. If I'm right on that, is it the local state? Yeah.
State of Minnesota and actually all the surrounding states adopt NFPA codes as part of their law. And that's the rules that we're governed by. You mentioned too about small storage tanks and any accidents that we've had over the years. A big difference, and we haven't had to speak of accidents, but a big difference between those installations, there's no requirements in NFPA to install a $2,000 internal valve in a 500-gallon tank. There is in these large storage tanks. If that large storage tank somehow rolled down a hill, that internal valve could shear off completely and the gas flow would stop. Don't get that advantage because it would be far too costly to have those kind of safety features built into a 500-gallon tank for a house. So this type of storage tank far exceeds safety requirements that are in place from the SME for just tanks that are being in your yard or at your home. Just wanted to add that in.
Thank you. Mark? I don't know if I have questions or comments, but I read, thank for all the snow we had over the weekend, then I got a chance to look up all these NFPA, and I couldn't believe a tank this size can be 10 feet from a road, 50 feet from a schoolyard, and 250 feet from a school. I mean, that's one of the rules that they have. The other one, and I'm not sure, Mr. Murphy talked about needing so much water, and the NFPA says for a 45,000 gallon tank, they need 296 gallons of water per minute to cool the tank exposed to fire for 10 minutes, so about 3,000 gallons.
Right.
Now that's, I'm not sure where the numbers he came, I couldn't find the numbers he had anywhere, but this is the NFPA, which is the national, the one you use, NFPA 58. So I was really surprised you could put a tank that size 250 feet from a school.
And you see a lot of 30,000 gallon tanks. I mean, driving down the road, I mean, there's like Amish Market has a 30,000 gallon tank over there.
What size is the Cochrane one?
Cochrane is a 30,000 gallon tank.
It's along the highway?
It's just off the highway. It's on it's North Main Street, so it's across the tracks. So it's not. I guess it's not really right on the highway.
The Utica one's at the intersection of 33 and 14, so that's.
Yep, and we have two 30,000 gallon tanks there. I'll get it over there.
I guess at this time I'll make a couple of comments. One of the things, I don't know if you're aware of or not, but this particular parcel of land is basically a swamp. That northwest corner, I've tried to farm that. John remembers them years. And I know even after they built the FedEx facility, if you get a rainy spell, it's pretty hard to get anything but a boat in there to mow the grass and weeds off. So I think that you should at least be aware of that, because it could cause you some problems.
Right.
And the other comment I have, I guess, and this is just my own personal opinion, if I was building this facility, I don't think I would bother with the township road as an exit, because to me that just doesn't make any sense. I realize that you seem to think that you can get around turning around, but I would be willing to bet that there'll be more than one instance when you're going to have to turn around on the property whether you like to or not. And so I don't quite understand where you're going to gain efficiency or any other positive benefit by exiting on Gopher Road. I would just do like FedEx does and go in and out on the 12.
Yeah, and I think some of that too is to limit, the amount of road we'd have to put in. But maybe that's something we need to take into consideration.
Well, in the spring of the year, I can almost bet you that if you just gravel what you proposed there, you're going to get stuck pretty doggone well in that terrain, whether you want to or not.
Well, and I think, we're going to have to do some grading and stuff too.
Yeah, I'm sure of that.
As a part of it, and we'll have to address, the concerns with the stormwater runoff and, make sure we're not, running water over into his property too, but, I think there will be some things we have to do there.
Now, is there going to be a perimeter fence around this property?
We were not intending to put a fence. I noticed in the recommendations there was something about landscaping or putting up some sort of site kind of barrier to the adjacent properties, which...
That'll just cut off Lila's view further.
Okay. And, I mean, we want to be, as good a neighbor as we can be, and, I mean, I don't want to upset people, and, that's not my intention,
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I have a
Kelly.
question. This is primarily for staff. I guess, thank you. I guess I wasn't aware that there were stormwater concerns at the neighboring property, and I was just wondering when a business goes next door, or something goes in next door to a property that does require an NPDES permit, are the cumulative effects taken into account by either the MPCA or soil and water, or not?
I guess my reply would be that each site is looked at on its own merit and own set of circumstances. But yes, I mean, if putting a plan together has to account for existing drainage patterns, that has to be accounted for with any substantial additions or adjacent properties. When Daryl looks at rain and runoff events, they have to calculate how much of an area it's draining, so yes, it could affect the plan that has to be incorporated on.
And Soil and Water did say that there was not an adequate erosion control stormwater plan that had been developed, so.
That's correct. There hasn't been any plans for him to look at yet.
Okay. So that would be something that's included in the conditions?
At this point, number 6, as recommended by staff, talks about the landscape plan in accordance to 9.15. And if there was aspects regarding stormwater, you may want to put a colon, semicolon, or another sentence to say, or to include a plan that details stormwater management on the site to be reviewed by the SWCD and the planning department prior to the issuance of a development certificate.
Where are you reading that? Which
Number
page?
6.
Conclusion? Number 6?
Conditions number 6?
Oh, condition number 6.
It would be in the draft findings.
So findings of fact for.
Oh, okay. Conditions, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Do that again now.
Okay. I guess essentially 6, condition number 6 would be it's an entirety, but if it's the discretion of the planning commission, staff would recommend that you add an additional item or extend that to also say to include a plan that details stormwater management on the site to be reviewed by the SWCD and planning department prior to the issuance of the development certificate.
Kelly, is that your wish to amend this, or?
I would like to, I would move to amend the conditions as stated by our zoning administrator, yes.
I would second that.
Okay, we have an amendment to add a condition or further wordage in condition number 6. And Kelly moved and Chris seconded it. All right, now is there any further discussion on this amendment? Steve?
I'd just like to ask the petitioner, are you receptive of if a stormwater plan is required by your CUP? you're willing to comply to whatever, what the zoning administrator just read off? Okay.
A retention basin on the north side of the site might be recommended or something, so. Or insisted upon, I suppose.
Mark?
Now, they said, is it 20% would be impervious?
Where was that?
Is it 20%? Approximately 20%? So 80% will be natural, pretty much natural.
The way it is now.
I know, and that's my point. I'm wondering why we need to do something that this is pretty small in the whole scheme of
Winona County.
of what it is. I mean, I understand the FedEx one right next door, which is concrete. I'm not, I guess I don't understand needing something, it's hardly changed at all from what it is.
Are you asking me?
Well,
May I
I'm asking
respond,
the
Mr.
chairman.
Chair?
Go ahead.
I guess, my reasoning is that stormwater doesn't know that this is a separate parcel from what's going on next door. So stormwater doesn't really care. So, and I'm basing it on the guidance of the Soil and Water Conservation District, which said it did not have an adequate stormwater plan. And since we're hearing from neighbors that there is a stormwater issue in that area, I think it would be only prudent to actually make sure that, given we've already got problems, yeah, I understand that only 20% is going to be impermeable, but, given that we do have problems in the area, that it would be prudent to do a plan that the Soil and Water Conservation District thinks will work and move forward to make sure the neighbors are happy. And if the petitioner is okay with that, then why not do it?
Let's see. Richard?
How large is this lot in terms of square footage?
Well, it's 1.85 acres.
Okay, so we got 60-some thousand square feet, right?
Your cell phone works better than mine.
I didn't use it.
Oh, okay.
So what it amounts to is, by the time you get, we have to look at what we got to work with. I don't think we can put a pond within 20, 30 feet, man-made retention pond that somebody's going to come and suck out. I mean, what do we do with that water? And what do we penalize this guy for the FedEx runoff? Okay? I mean, we all wind up getting the same amount of water per square foot, and I go through this a lot. I've been on these boards for going on 6 years. I don't know whether we could, no matter what we put here, will we do good, or do we just waste Severson's money?
Well, a lot of that water might be coming from FedEx onto
Yeah,
it.
that's what I'm saying.
So they might be the ones that need to be putting the pond in.
Well, some of it might be coming from the farmer's house or.
Off of Highway 12.
Off
of the town road.
Off the town road. I mean, I think it gets to be an exercise in futility. It may feel good, but I think we're throwing money in a wet hole.
Mark?
And it was pretty much the same comment. I don't want to punish Mr. Severson for the neighbor's problem. I mean, that's, I can't ask for him to fix his neighbor's problem. I don't want him to make any of his own, but I don't want to.
I think Soil and Water's going to have to.
Find him guilty of something that it's his neighbor's problem.
Soil and Water, I feel it needs to do something with theirs.
Just a second, Chris. Eric?
The only thing I'd add, that if you're developing a stormwater plan, yes, you do have to look at the existing pattern, but the stormwater management practices, from what I understand, is to control just your parcel from runoff leaving your parcel. So I think the management or whatever plans would be drawn up would be keeping that key aspect in mind.
Chris, your
So,
turn.
The thing is, I don't really think that it's punishment. I really see it more as getting guidance. So I heard Kay talking about native plants which can have root systems that are 5 or 6 feet deep, whereas grass has a root system that's only 6 inches. So planting the right material, or the right plants, can help with water infiltration. So I don't really see it as punishing them or making them deal with the issues with the neighbor's property as much as giving guidance so that what's put in will have the best effect in terms of keeping the water on the property and infiltrating into the soil rather than running off. So it's not a bioretention is a rain garden. It's not a pond that has sitting water. The water should go, sort of absorb and infiltrate within the 24 hours. So.
Are they, I would suggest that they aren't exacerbating a problem. The problem's there already. The runoff of that lot's going north the way it is. So.
I'm pretty sure, though, that Stevenson would be amenable to planting the Greenway Botanical Garden concept, however effective that was, who knows?
So,
Go ahead, Steve.
One concern that I have is, we discussed moving the tank, we discussed making a turnaround, we discussed not having the road go out on to Gopher, we've discussed a pond, and I feel like we're tasked with approving their application, not making it ours. And, we're discussing a lot of significant changes. I don't know what their plans for the future are, why they, might have the tank right where they have it. My sense is I'd like to approve it as close to what they applied for as we can, unless we can see that there's just a hazard that can't be overcome that we need to fix. So that's just my thought process.
Don.
In respect to the neighbors' concerns that live down the road, I would think that they would not have to evacuate if there's a remote possibility of a hazard here. They could stay home and wouldn't have to be driving by. So in my mind, I can minimize that exposure to those families, I think.
Well, there was a condition, I believe, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
sorry. There was a condition in there already to develop a emergency management plan, I thought. Did I see that?
Yes, it's in there.
Okay.
Yeah. Recommendation number, I had it here a little bit ago.
Yeah, number 4, under the conditions.
Number 4 or whatever. And the local fire chief has enforcement of the NFPA in control. And we just heard from Mark some details about that.
Okay, let's,
Mr. Chair, I have one last question for staff, if I could.
okay.
Sorry.
I hope it pertains to your motion.
It does not. It
Let's-
pertains to a different condition. Thank you.
Okay.
You're right.
All right. Is there any further discussion pertaining to the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those, do we have to read it over again?
No.
Is everybody in agreement they understand? Okay. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
I'm sorry, the motion is,
The amendment has
The
stormwater
amendment.
plan.
The amendment, yeah.
That's
would you restate the motion, please?
Okay.
The way that I have this written is the recommended condition 6 would be the petitioner commissioner shall submit a landscape plan to include a plan detailing stormwater management plan on the site to be reviewed by Soil and Water Conservation District and Planning Department prior to issuance of a development certificate in accordance with Chapter 9.1.5C of the Winona County zoning ordinance for screening look at the property adjacent to or in view of the residential property.
I would hope that that would not include a requirement for a retention pond unless there's some statutory requirement for it.
No.
And
I don't
I
think,
wouldn't want that interpreted so broadly that it would require.
Well, it's pretty much leaving it up to soil and water is what it sounds.
Right, that's exactly what they're gonna do what's necessary.
soil and water conservation.
And Daryl might come in and want a retention pond, and if it's not in statute, I don't want Daryl overreaching.
Well, is that our responsibility?
Somebody's gotta look after the citizens.
Okay, I think we were voting here. All right, let's start over again. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
We're gonna have to have a show of hands.
Yeah, we're gonna have to have a show of hands here. All right. All those in favor of the amended motion, say, raise your hand, excuse me. So we got 3. All those opposed to the amended motion, raise your hand. We got 5. So the motion fails. Or the amended motion fails. Okay, Chris, you said you had another question.
No, it's Kelly.
Or Kelly, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and this is primarily for staff. Have you put this condition for, a similar condition to contact local area emergency responders and personnel to discuss protocol for incident response and any special considerations with this operation? Have you put that in another one before, and are you familiar with that process?
Currently, that goes on all of our solar array installations, so it's something that has been done. They've worked with different local fire departments wherever those have gone in, and we determined that this facility was close enough and had enough of a hazard that that was something that we could require and wouldn't hurt anything. I mean, the chance is small, but it'd be better that they're trained in if they're going to be the first responders on site on what they could do to maybe prevent it from being worse than it needs to be.
Sure.
So, that's the theory behind that.
Do they typically inform local residents? Like, we have a couple families on that road that have some concerns, so do the local responders work with the local residents to make certain that they feel comfortable with the plan?
Typically not. That has not been one of the items that's been specified. As Blake mentioned, a lot of the solar requests, but a lot of home occupations have required that condition as well, especially if there was any product or any material or any type of manufacturing or equipment, if there was a higher potential, that has been recommended just to basically have an open house, basically a sit-down with the fire department and local responders to give them kind of a heads up and to basically create that dialogue between those entities that there is a new type of activity that's going to be at a certain location.
Okay, is there any other discussion on this CUP? Or do you want to go through the findings of fact at this time?
Let's go to the findings of fact, I think, and we hear no more.
We can just make a motion to approve and accept, right? Or you want to go through everything? It'll take a long time.
I think if there are concerns
Well,
about the.
yeah, we have to allow all the commission members to challenge each one of the findings of fact if they want to. Okay, is there anybody that disagrees with number 1? I don't have to read them, do I, counsel?
Park, schools, streets, that one?
Number 1.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Chris?
So I would like the folks in the audience who have spoken about the concerns about the dead-end road and the fire hazard, and even losing your view, to know that I do care. And so probably this first finding of fact is the one that I can't agree that it will not cause a burden. I mean, I think that the residents on the road have a valid concern. So just speaking to the whole conditional use permit, this is an allowed use on the property. And so I feel like overall I need to support the recommendation to allow the conditional use permit to proceed, but I simply can't really agree with the very first condition.
And you understand that we don't have to agree with all the conditions, okay?
Yep, exactly.
Does everybody understand what we just talked about here? And everybody is okay with that?
I agree with Chris that the streets in particular pose an issue.
Okay,
based
so
on input of the residents.
Do we have to vote on this with this?
Only if you want to change the way that it's currently worded. If you want to change that to the use will create an excessive burden and put in language relating to how you think that, then we would need to have a vote to modify the findings.
Okay, does anyone wish to do that? Okay, let's,
Yeah,
Chris.
I'll move that I would love to amend this so that the first condition said that it would create an excessive burden, and that the comments be inserted that it is a dead-end road and that there are residents here who are concerned about the fire hazard and their inability to have an escape route in the case of a serious emergency.
But that's the findings of fact, not the conditions. You said condition.
Right, sorry. So what I'm talking
Findings.
about, the first
We're
finding
talking
of
about
fact.
findings.
Yeah.
I'd second that.
So, I mean, basically
It's
just want to be on the
been
record
moved
that you
and
don't agree with
seconded to, it will create, number one, will create an excessive burden. All right, is there any other further discussion on this?
It seems like that's an overlap with number 7, am I?
Let's not get it any more confusing.
Well, okay.
I think it's a bit out of context in number 1, because number 1 talks about an excessive burden. And 7 is a better place to talk about it. I agree with you.
Just a point of order. I think in the past we've discussed the findings of fact, and everyone can have their own position. We don't usually vote on them. I mean, we vote on the CUP and the conditions.
She made a motion and was seconded.
Yeah, I know, and that's what I'm saying, point of order.
Well,
Everyone's free to have their own opinion and put that on record.
Everyone is free to have their own opinion and put that on record. However, if you want to change the findings to reflect the majority opinion that would then go to the board, that's what would be amended. So essentially what Chris and Kelly have indicated is that they want the position of the planning commission to be that the use will create the excessive burden for those reasons, and a change was presented to the commission.
Mr. Chair.
What was presented.
There's a motion and a second to change the language.
Yeah.
So we have to address it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, even
If I could just clarify, we did used to vote on each finding. We changed that because it was taking too long, but we all agreed that we could
still do it.
do it all at once, or if there were issues with one finding or another, that we would address them. So we used to vote on every single one. We did change that.
So, I mean,
So now
I agree with it. So we'll vote this through, but whoever falls on one side or the other still has the ability to weigh in that they don't agree with it. I mean,
Correct.
if it doesn't go the way you want, you can
Absolutely.
still weigh in. So, I mean,
Yep.
that's what I think we should just do to start with.
Fine.
I'd like to speak to the motion. I'm going to vote against it, at least because it's out of context here.
Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of findings of fact number 1, the use will create an excessive burden, and then I'm going to stop there.
Changing it to will instead of will not.
Right.
Correct.
Well, yeah. It will create an excessive burden.
So we're voting on changing the language.
Yeah, we're voting on changing the language. Everybody understands that? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. I believe the opposition had more than the ayes.
Yes.
So it is defeated. Let's move on to number 2. Is there any discussion on that? Hearing none. Number 3.
I did have something on 2.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If we were to go with the conditions that the staff have recommended, there would be a landscape plan that would hopefully address the concerns that neighbors have brought up, correct? Is that your understanding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A landscape plan?
That's,
Yeah.
that's recommendation number 7.
Right.
The petitioner shall submit a landscape.
It's 6.
Correct.
It's 6, but yeah.
So whichever. So I guess
It's conditions.
I did want to, just for the record, state that neighbors had concerns about the appearance.
Okay.
It should be covered in the conditions.
Okay.
Okay, that's all I had.
All right. Number 3. Is there anybody want to discuss 3? Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7.
I have concerns about number 7. I think it'll be covered by 4. I don't feel assured that the fire department's going to follow up with the neighbors with that plan, but I would like to see that certainly.
If,
Number 4 here in the condition.
Oh, you mean in the conditions? Okay.
So how would we word this?
You just want to make a note of that, or you?
Yes.
You just want to go on the record?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's all 7 of the findings of fact. At this time, do I have a motion on this docket number 41918-01?
When do we go through the conditions now?
we just,
Oh, the conditions, we can go through them at this point if you want to.
I think we should.
Okay. All right. Condition number 1. Is there any discussion on that? Don?
I do have one statement, and maybe should have made sooner, or one point raised sooner. I think sometimes when people fill out their petition, they might put something on it that could later raise an issue if somebody focuses on that in concern of this abide by all representations and commitments made during the permitting process. On the bottom of the application, page 21 in our packet, the bottom line there, explain hours and days of operation. I can see that somebody could raise a point in the future. There's some ambiguity to be found in there. In that last phrase, business hours 12. And I think that business hours 12 should be struck from with the owners, or with the petitioner's request to do so, and leave it at the 20 hours loading and unloading of propane.
In other words, you're saying that in the fall of the year, they're going to be hauling it out just as fast as they haul it in.
I would never want anyone to come in and say it says business hours are 12.
Okay,
in there, third.
Council can you get us out of this dilemma?
Petitioner can agree to strike things from his petition.
Okay,
I would agree.
you understand what we're talking about?
Yeah, just leave it at 24 hours.
Okay,
You get emergency deliveries late at night.
right, yeah. I know all about that.
And does that require a motion?
No,
No, just, it's a matter of record?
it is now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's see, where were they? Oops, I almost did it myself. So, we're on condition number 1 yet, right? Does anyone else have anything else to say? Condition number 2. Condition number 3. Condition number 4. Condition, whoops,
Sorry.
Kelly.
I guess, just for the record, once again, this has been brought up by residents, and I want the record to note that this is a concern. We've attempted to address it with a condition, but that condition does not state that residents will be told what to do in case of an emergency, and I think that's probably a fairly key issue in an emergency. That's it.
I see your point that there should be direct communication with the residents in addition to local authorities. Is that it?
I think so.
And how can we do that?
Council, can we just add that, or do we have to have a motion, or?
It depends on who you're requiring to provide documentation or to provide that information and how you're going to require them to do that. It might make more sense to make it a recommendation and not necessarily a specific condition, because that would be very difficult to enforce. And we can't require the fire department to do that because they're not bound by anything we put into these conditions.
I guess I would recommend, if I could, I would recommend, if we're saying they're coming up with an emergency response plan, the petitioner must share that plan with the neighbors via mail upon the completion of construction. Does that make sense?
Donnie?
I wanted to ask Assistant Attorney Meadow.
We could put something like that in there.
Shelley?
Kelly.
How about a comma after responders, scratch N, personnel, comma, and, if you want a comma there, and residents of Gopher Road? Does that address your concern?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Kay.
I just would request that anything that we do with any of the findings are possible for the planning and zoning staff to actually verify. We're not in the fire industry, but if, coming in for the development certificate, or if they were to come in with proof that they had, done a plan, just like with proof that they have a stormwater plan or anything else. It's something, if it's been sent and they can document that it's been sent or something like that, we can certainly put it in the file or scan it. Otherwise, if there are conditions that we would have absolutely no way of verifying ever, then they're kind of pointless in the conditions because they're not verifiable. So anyway, just a pitch for something that we could verify.
Don?
Then, instead of a period, a comma, with an incident response plan filed with the Planning Commission? Does that?
Planning and Environmental Services.
Yeah, okay. Does that do it for you?
if it's a copy of a plan that's required, elsewhere, or that they can verify that has been shared with the neighbors or that kind of thing, we can certainly add that to the property file.
Yeah.
Do you have any additional comments? Just a moment.
The only thing that I guess I'd be looking for is that if there's information that's shared to the neighbors, just maybe a quick list of contact information for the company, for the responding fire department, and just, some safety protocol that you would typically see in one of these bulletins that the applicants had mentioned earlier.
I've read it and reread it countless times. I think it's right the way it is, because we start listing off people on Gopher Road, then are we implying that it doesn't apply to anyone else in the vicinity? There's neighbors to the west, there's
neighbors to the east.
It implies that they're supposed to have, well, it doesn't imply, it says petitioners contact applicable local area emergency responders to discuss the protocol for the incident. Of course it's for people on Gopher Road and it's anyone else.
No, the special concern, though, is it's a dead-end road.
Yep, there's no other way out.
Well, I'm just saying, don't paint yourself out of other people that have concerns too.
The plan would be available to the public. My point, if I could,
Richard,
is the first people who are going to be contacted is fire, police are going to be there, and they are going to notify. I will guarantee you, if it's as catastrophic, which I don't think is ever going to happen, but if it's some great explosion, everybody's pretty much notified by the explosion. But in as much as the appropriate authorities can get in and out of there to these folks, I believe they will. I believe that's what the State Patrol will do. I think it's what the County Sheriff's Department is going to do. And I don't know how we get in the way of that. We're going to screw them up.
Don.
I don't think that we're getting in the way of anything if we amend this and appreciate the special concerns of the people on the dead-end road. And I'll support a motion that does that. Okay.
Okay.
Well, we kind of covered it.
Do we have a second to this?
Should I second?
All right, Vince seconds it. You got that in? All right. All right. Council, do you want to read what we just motioned?
What I believe I've got is that condition 4 would read, petitioners contact applicable local area emergency responders, personnel, and Gopher Road neighbors to discuss protocol for incident response and any special considerations with this operation, with documentation provided to the planning department.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion then? Hearing none and seeing no hands waving. All those in favor of amending condition number 4, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The condition number 4 has been amended. Okay, number 5. Number 6.
Just for the record, this is to address the concern about the view.
Right.
I think it should stand as is, but we need to make sure it's done.
Okay. And that, how much time do you get after completion of the construction to install this?
Usually another growing season, I think, after.
Mr. Chairman, usually we work out kind of the angles of view for the closest neighbors and, do a site visit drive through and mark up a drawing and say, screening should probably be here, here, and here. We don't specify the kind of materials, but the sizes are specified for the plant materials to be used if they're evergreens, a certain size in the zoning ordinance. Obviously, we're not going to make them plant evergreens, outside the April through, early October timetable to make sure that plants get established when they're best to be established. And we're happy to work with any of the petitioners on that.
Okay. So, is there any other discussion on 6?
I noted the concern of someone about the view out their kitchen window. I don't know that we can totally screen for that, but.
No. All right. Number 7. So, okay, at this time, do we have a motion to approve or deny docket number 419-18-01?
I move it approved with the amended condition 4.
Second.
All right. Don moves to approve. Arlie seconds it. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those voting.
I'm sorry, I do have further discussion.
Whew, under the wire again.
I'm sorry. Just very briefly, we're here to make certain that CUPs are in line with the county ordinance. But I feel that we should have addressed the stormwater issue. And because we didn't, I don't believe that we are doing our due diligence. And because of that, and only because of that, I will probably be voting against this. So, just for the record, that's it.
All right. All those in favor of the motion to approve this docket number 1, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Okay. At this time, I say that the Winona County Planning Commission recommends approval of docket number 1. And so the next step in this process is it goes before the county commissioners. Whenever that happens, and so that's your next step for the Seversons. Okay. All right. I guess at this time we better get on with docket number 2.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I discussed this before. I have to recuse myself from this issue because of entanglements that I have with the folks.
Okay.
So I'm going to step out during it.
He's not going to participate on this docket.
You can still stay here.
Vince, you don't have to step out. You just can't vote.
You just keep your mouth.
I'll sit in the room.
Okay.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
All right, staff, who's going to handle this one? Eric, okay. Well, that took care of most of the crowd.
Okay, 419-18-2, this is a conditional use permit to allow a new parcel less than 40 acres. In this case, the applicants wish to create a new 8-acre parcel for a new home site. This is in St. Charles Township, Section 28. It's along Cherokee Road, which is a dead-end township road that comes off of Highway 14 and runs to the south. At this point, I believe it's probably about 1.5 miles, 2 miles south of Highway 14. The applicants propose to create 8 acres, and they would create a new driveway along the northern property line, which angles to the west and then slightly to the south to a new house site that is currently in a segment of woods. Here's a couple of pictures. This is standing from the township road, looking back to the west at the new building site. The new house would be approximately right in this location. And on this photo, this is, I think, a little bit closer. It'd probably be about in this area. In looking at the
excuse me.
Since you're looking at that slide, could you, where you showed, where the pointer is with the house, is the area where the driveway is going to be on that slide as well?
No, it's not. I think it just might come into the viewer on the one on the right, extremely to the right side.
Thank you, sir.
The video that I have should show it, so. In looking at the prime soil coverage, a good share of the parcel is prime soils, and it does encompass starting the portions of the woods. But in this case, the applicants intend to create the house on the non-prime part. You can see it comes pretty close, but for calling it, from basically measuring it and everything I could look at from the soil type, a clear majority of the building site would be on a non-prime soil. It'd be a class 4 or higher. And I guess we'll watch the video. The orange flags are about where the building would start in this location. We are in section 28 of St. Charles Township, and this is in regards to the Gary and Nola Dunn conditional use permit request, whereas the petitioners seek a conditional use permit to allow a new parcel intended for a new residential dwelling to be on a parcel located less than 40 acres in size. We're currently just at the proposed new house site that essentially shows, I think, the orange stakes and flags marking showing the general location of that. We're just currently in the wood line that's bordered by some fields, and as I walk to the east, you can make out the St. Charles Township Road, which is Cherokee Road, in which a new driveway from this building site will be connected. The intent of the applicants in creating this 8 acres is to create a parcel that consumes as less prime soil and productive ag land as possible in achieving that. The house would be approximately 72 by 61 by some of the rough plans that the applicants have put together at this point. They do have flexibility in creating the parcel as they own considerable acreage in the area. I didn't think, when I listened to it, it wasn't that windy, but every time it's amplified, it just gets worse. We're looking now back to the east, and the driveway, I believe, would come in, I think, pretty close to, yeah, like right in that area. There would be a small strip of corn that they would go through at, it's probably 150 feet, 200 feet at the very most. This would be the view looking to the south, the crop field and the wooded strip, and then I'm pointing out the 2 residential neighbors that are immediately to the north, right around the last corner of the woods. This is looking back to the west, kind of the strip of woods, and I'll continue going east right out into the field and kind of show where the driveway approach would be. And the closest neighbors that are mentioned, or that you can see on the GIS map, are right there, I believe, would be the property line. So the applicants can correct me if I'm wrong, but the driveway then would go across this small segment of currently cornfield to get to the site. A driveway permit off of that road would require review and permit from St. Charles Township. And I'm going to show a cross-section elevation from the road to the house in a supplemental exhibit that I put together. And I believe they would have to put a culvert. There is a small dip from the shoulder of the road to that site. I believe it drops about 2 feet, so they might have to at least design the culvert or which way that flow will run at that point. But there is a small drop as far as the elevation goes into the cornfield. Ann, do you want to load that other exhibit? Because I think this was also pointed, the neighbor had submitted some letters, or submitted a letter with some current concerns, and got on the Minnesota Topo LiDAR site where you can actually do cross sections. Can you maybe just bring it down just a little bit to show the graph below? And when I snap a line, that's about as, it's probably not exact, but it's just kind of maybe for discussion purposes. It basically runs, I ran a line 150 feet out, and it shows that it drops, roughly 2 to 3 feet for the first 150 feet. And then, grab one more thing here. What's kind of highlighted in red would be a segment that's approximately 300 feet in total length. And the last 150 feet is where the rise would be. And you can see I'm actually cutting against the grain of the contours. So in practice, they probably wouldn't construct a driveway like that. They would more like come to a certain point, get on a contour, and follow a contour. They wouldn't be running at a sharp angle like that. I was trying to look at what the worst case scenario would be. And over that last 150 feet, there would be about a 12% maximum slope that one would encounter, but with proper design, they could surely keep it under 12% to the building site.
Eric, Donnie has a question.
So the north property line is about where the red line is horizontal there now?
Yes, it sits just above that, I believe. I can see some lawn there, and it's pretty hard. The imagery isn't real clear, but that property line sits right above it, right above the red line.
So the red line is how you would see the driveway being built?
I just put that in as just an estimate. I just freehand sketched it just to get
until you get up.
Just to see what that elevation profile would look like for a driveway along those points. Other than that, the only other new information we received, I think that came in today, was the letter from the neighbor. So.
Okay, has anyone got any further questions for Eric? Okay, at this point, does the petitioner wish to make any comments?
Good evening. My name is Gary Dunn. I live at 25793 Cherokee Road. I'm the petitioner. My wife, Nola, back in there not feeling really well tonight. So, received this letter from the Johnsons at about 3 o'clock this afternoon. I haven't had a lot of time to dissect it. Read it a couple times through. And he's concerned about driveway and runoff and all that, and so am I. I want to make if you've seen where we live, we're very proud of our lawn. We're very proud of our home, our building site. There's 3 homes there. It's pretty well kept for the most part. We plan on this next one. I've owned this farm with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law since 1995. We burnt an existing home down and rebuilt a new one, the one home that Nola and I live in. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law, Scott and Jerry Lynn Sinola, have built another home, a third home on the property, and then the original home, or one original home that was there, currently there. My wife and her sister, Jerry Lynn, parents live there. They're getting up into their 80s and, have some health issues and have come to a point where we are splitting the farm. We've owned it 50-50. We ran it with basically no problems. But we're getting to the point, we're approaching that age where they're thinking about estate planning. We have families. I have 3 kids, 3 or 6 grandchildren, and you're not going to be here forever. So we're splitting the farm. We're getting the south portion of the farm. The north portion is a little bit more tillable, a little bit more active in the farm situation. And my nephew Jared and his wife and child are planning on buying our home, and is the basic sole reason that we want to build this other home. We don't want to leave the farm. We love it out there, and that's where we want to be. Regardless of anybody else's thoughts and explanations of alternative motives, and we really don't have any alternative motives. The only motive that we have to separate the 8 acres is to obtain a conventional loan. That's true. I mean, that might be part of what he's thinking, but instead of going to 40 acres and having to have a commercial loan to build a home, the financing would be the sole purpose of doing the 8 acres. We could go to a larger, we're going to own 120 acres of the farm. We could put that house in that same place, connected to those 120 acres too, if you so vote against this petition. So, any questions, anyone?
Don?
The portion of the lot, the 8 acres south of the house, is that south?
Yep.
That's till now that it will continue to be farmed, right?
Yes. We're going to lose, I suppose, 40 feet of that field, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes to build a reasonable driveway.
Yeah,
we're going to,
but the rest will be tilled.
Probably 10 feet of that is currently the neighbor's lawn, which is still our property. The tree line is the property line. He does mow that, and I basically probably will leave that into lawn and mow it myself. One of us will mow it, so I guess we'll have to fight about that. But other than that, that's basic. The driveway, I assume that we may need another culvert further up the hill. I try to maybe put some retaining wall or some type of dike system in there to keep runoff from hitting that field. I don't want my cornfield to wash away, and I don't want the neighbors are uphill, so they won't be affected by any runoff. But that ditch, I told the township they put a culvert, they supply a culvert. If it needs a bigger culvert or additional cost, I'm willing to go with that. Dennis Barth is doing the excavating on the property, and he hasn't really we haven't really sat down with a plan, but we'll sit there and I need property around the house to get to the septic system so I can get somebody out to pump it. So there's some things that we'll have to do to make it so it's level enough to let the house survive as a dwelling.
Okay, thank you. Okay, one comment I forgot to mention last time before we opened the public hearing, that we would appreciate if you limited your comments to 2 minutes. I won't be to the second, but I'll try and limit you to as close to 2 minutes as possible. All right, do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll move.
Chris moved,
Second.
Kelly seconds. All those in favor of opening the public hearing on docket 4-19-18-02, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The public hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to speak, come forward, state your name and address, and your comments.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jared Sainola, currently residing at 351 Fifth Avenue Southeast in Dover, Minnesota. I am the nephew that Gary was regarding when he said that my wife and I would enjoy to take over the family farm. And I think Gary alluded to the, splitting off the 8 acres for the loan part, and then I don't know if I just want to make emphasis on the estate planning part of it. We've had closed door meetings of my wife and I in the future buying the other half of the farm down the road, when monetarily possible, but in some tragic event where my aunt and uncle weren't around anymore, just for ease, that would also make it easier for us to purchase the other half of the farm without having to buy another homestead, essentially. On the farm, we've been running it ourselves for just over 5 years now. We used to rent out the pasture land and cropland, and my senior year at North Dakota State, which would have been in 2013, we began running all the livestock portion of the farm, where we started out with 15 cow-calf pairs. Today, we will calve out 39 cow-calf pairs on the operation. So to speak to the letter and the seriousness of the farm, I would say that we're very, very serious about running this. I've been on this farm since 1995, and we ran cattle, and I know our cropland renter very well. So it's all that I've done, and all that I've dreamed of since I was a little kid would be one day to run it myself. And the sustainability part of it is we're in our 4th year of operation, going on our 5th year, and we've sold cattle all over the country. We've sold bulls and seed stock locally to 3 different counties. And the main reason for us wanting to be on the farm is just, I guess you could say, quality of life standpoint, from the sustainability of me working off the farm currently while I'm trying to build it to be self-sustaining enough. It's a 15-mile drive from the farm to where we currently reside. Excuse me. It's a lot for my family, especially this time of year when winter won't go away and we've got baby calves on the ground. I think you get my point. So I won't take up any more of your time, but I think it's a feasible way to split up the farm. In order for me, being a first generation farmer, we put in a lot of money, time, we've bought our own equipment in order to run this farm. And we do crop some of the tillable land. We do make our own hay. We do purchase the corn from the land renter for feed for corn silage, and we harvest the crop residue for bedding and corn stalks. So, as time goes on and our operation grows, I see us running more of that cropland. It's just not monetarily sound as a first-generation farmer in today's agricultural markets to go out and try to run the whole entire thing. We want to do it in baby steps, and we want to do it, sustainably. So for my family to continue doing it, it would be, much appreciated to be able to move to the farm in this way. So is there any questions?
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I think I turned it down, but that was the 2-minute timer.
I'll be brief. My name is Scott Sainola, 25893 Cherokee Road. Thanks for the opportunity. My wife and I are parents of Jared, and Hannah's our daughter-in-law, and June's our 10-month-old grandchild. I just wanted to talk, and I'll be very brief, about commitment. because and we've tried to be good neighbors, I think, down Cherokee Road, the 23 years we've lived there. And our neighbor, Mr. Johnson, I think, questions the commitment of the farming operation and of that lad that just spoke. Jared's been, as he said, on the farm since he's been 3, been in 4-H, graduated from North Dakota State as his wife did in an animal science degree, works at Benson Farm in Lewiston, and puts in anywhere from 4 to 6, sometimes 8 hours a night farming. So there's no question about the commitment of that family back there. The other thing I would say, and I think Nola and Gary, we've lived on that farm as we bought it together 23 years ago. We're virtually best friends. We're family and best friend. That's probably unusual. Been nary a word said, a harsh word between us. They're sacrificing a home that they have now, and Nola's called it her dream home, to put this home up for the benefit of agriculture, for the benefit of her, Gary and Nola's nephew and wife. So I just want to, last word is, you don't have to question the commitment and work ethic of that family back there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, for the second time, does anyone wish to speak to docket number 4-19-18-02?
Third time.
For the third and final time, does anyone wish to speak to docket 4-19-18-02? Don, no, just to
close the public.
Okay, all right. I guess that's in order. All right.
Second, yeah, go ahead.
Don moved to close the public hearing. Arlie seconded it. All those in favor of closing the public hearing on docket 4-19-18-02, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The public hearing for this docket is now closed. Does anyone have any questions or of anyone at this time? Seeing no response, if I can find it, let's go to the findings of fact. Is there anyone that has any point in the 10 findings of fact that they want to discuss?
Do we need a motion then? I'll move to accept
Well,
the
no,
findings.
we got to get through the conditions.
We don't have, we can pass them.
I'm just going to make a motion to accept the findings of fact. 'cause that's what we
Okay,
did
all right.
last time, right?
That's fine, that's fine.
Second.
Yeah.
All right, so Steve made a motion to accept the findings of fact, and Kelly seconds it.
We'll get it, yeah. All in favor? All in favor?
All of those in favor of the findings of fact, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The findings of fact are approved, all 10 of them. All right, now, the conditions that go along with the findings of fact.
I would, it looks like the staff did a great job on these conditions. I would recommend that we recommend approval of this and accept the conditions as the staff has written them.
Second.
You recommend or make a motion?
That was my motion.
Okay.
Okay, so Kelly makes the motion and Donnie seconds it for the following conditions, 1, 2, and 3. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The conditions are passed. All right, now we need a motion on the whole kit and caboodle. All right, Mark?
Isn't that what we just did?
No, we just did a separate part.
My understanding of Kelly's motion was that it was a motion to approve with the conditions
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Is that okay
we
with
did
everybody?
it already.
All right, my fault. All right, so those of you connected with docket number 2, we recommend the approval to the county board, and they have to decide what they want to do with it.
That came from down there.
Eric,
The only thing I'd say is that that would be scheduled to go in front of, I believe, the May 8th county board meeting. That'd be the morning. And it'd be under consent, so it's not necessarily required that you be there unless the concerns came up and it was pulled by a commission. That would be the time.
welcome back, Vince. At this time, who's gonna do the item number 6? Lou? Okay, talk fast. We won't hold you to 2 minutes, though.
Thank you. I just have a brief presentation to introduce this ordinance amendment. What we're prepared for you tonight is an ordinance amendment on interim use permits. This was part of the suite of ordinance amendments that we took to the county board, and that the county board directed us to work on a couple of years ago now. We ran through a few. We've been working through. This is the next one that we'd like to discuss. Interim use permits. This is a definition straight from state statute. Interim use is a temporary use of property until a particular date, until the occurrence of a particular event, or until zoning regulations no longer permit it. That's how the state defines an interim use. It's located in Minnesota Statute 462.3597, Subdivision 1. Essentially, it's the enabling legislation to allow counties to adopt interim uses. The difference between a conditional use and an interim use is pretty, essentially they're the same process. They're exactly the same, except for this allows you to put a sunset date onto a permit. We've been doing that for years, just through the conditional use permit process and attaching conditions. That's not necessarily what case law has upheld as a practice. The preferred way of doing that would be to do it through an interim use permit. Interim use permits as used in other Minnesota counties. I think there's 28. I did a brief, just a real quick internet search yesterday, and I came up with references to 28 counties in Minnesota that have adopted interim uses. That's not including townships and cities who have also adopted interim uses. And they've done it in a variety of different ways. But again, that 28 is also just the ones I could find that are referenced on the internet. There's probably more that have adopted. So again, interim uses are temporary. They allow a land use in a certain zoning district, so it's the same as permitted uses or conditional uses. There'll be a list within the zoning district that would detail which ones are interim uses. That'd be essentially the temporary type uses that are currently conditional. So things like a manufactured home for temporary use, a hot mix plant. We'll get to the ordinance in a minute, and I'll go through some of the other conditions. They do not run with the land like a conditional use permit. They would expire at the end of the date, whenever that date or event is, which is indicated in the permit.
That's a question there. Do they run with? You say they don't run with the land,
right?
So if the land gets sold, changes hand, then it automatically expires, or what happens then?
They could, depending on how the permit goes. So if you attach a condition that says that that this runs as if the date or event can span property owners, then it could be transferred and continue.
Yeah, I'm thinking like especially solar arrays that go 25 years. It's a good chance that they're going to change hands during that time.
Right. So in that case, you wouldn't have a condition that would state that it would be attached to the specific person. You could do that, like with a home occupation. Somebody comes in for a salon at their home. I would get that every once in a while, where somebody's cutting hair out of their house. You could say that we're going to issue this permit to this person, and when they're gone, they're no longer doing it, then it would expire. But it enables you to do that, but it doesn't require it.
So it could or cannot. It could or it may or may not run with the land.
Right. Well, I mean, it wouldn't run with the land. It would run to the date or event that we specify in the permit.
It seems like a solar facility would have to run with something permanently attached to the ground. Seems like it should.
If you're going to do a solar facility, you'd want to sunset it like at 25 years at the end of a contract or something like that. So that would be the trigger that would end the permit.
But it seems like it should run with the land, not with the person.
And I mean, that would be something that, I mean, if you wanted it to run with the land, then you'd want to keep it as a conditional use. You wouldn't want to put an end date on it. You wouldn't want to make it an interim use.
Would you have to specify one or the other?
You would have to specify it at the beginning. So as we go through this, we're going to want to have a list of interim uses and conditional uses. And so the interim uses are ones that we determine are temporary in nature and that you might want to sunset. We also have, we're also included in there a provision similar to what's in the conditional use in the ag district, which would allow other similar uses. So it allows it to be a little bit more flexible. You don't have to have everything, listed exactly, but if something comes up that is temporary in nature, it's similar to what's listed under an interim use, we could bring that forward through the interim use permit process and consider it that way. Same as with the conditional use permit that we currently have the same provision. I can't think of an example right offhand that we've done that for, but things that have come up, that aren't specifically noted, but they're very similar to another use that it's a conditional use. We've brought it through the conditional use permit process. The other thing that state statute allows is that it would terminate with a change in zoning. So if something is like a use is allowed per the zoning ordinance, and then we issue a permit, 5 years later the ordinance changes, instead of creating a nonconformity, that permit would no longer be valid. The permit would be would sunset. Again, that's allowed by statute, and we can decide in our zoning ordinance if that's something that we want to include. If you look at the language that we have,
where's it allowed by statute?
Statute right here. I can pass it out. You can take the top and pass it along.
Thank you.
And it may terminate with a change in ownership as well, which we talked about. Interim use permit versus conditional use permit, and like I mentioned, it's the same process. What we're proposing in Chapter 5 would be to combine conditional uses and interim uses, and then add a little bit of qualifying language that distinguishes the two within that chapter, instead of creating a whole new chapter that essentially reiterates the same process that is included for the conditional use. So all the same process that's currently in there for conditional use and criteria would apply to interim uses. So, like we mentioned, CUPs run with the land. This would not. This would be something that, that sunsets. IUPs recognize a temporary use and expire upon a particular date or occurrence of a particular event. So temporary uses, if you want to go to the proposed ordinance that we have in the packet, we have lists of uses. It starts with the ARC zoning district and then kind of progresses through the zoning districts. And you'll see as you go through the zoning districts, the uses get less and less. That just reflects the number of temporary uses that are listed currently under those zoning districts.
Question. Are these all inclusive? In other words, are these the only ones you would be issuing interim for?
Yep.
So you'd have to change the zoning ordinance if you wanted to add another use?
Same as it is now, you would have to do that unless it was it fit under the other similar uses.
Okay.
And that's how the current ordinance works as well for permitted or conditional
Okay.
uses.
Let me ask you this, if I could. If I understood you right, and I've been fumbling around here and bouncing around, so I always have to go back and submit it. But if I understood you right, the ordinance is still going to continue to have the application for conditional use permits. As far as I know, there are conditional use permits out there, or have been historically, that stay with the land.
They all do.
They're not sunsetted.
Right.
Okay? For instance, if this couple that was here wanted to get this building permit on a conditional use permit for whatever reason, that would be with the land and it would stay with it forever.
Right.
Okay? Why would anybody want, I assume that it's not cheaper to get the interim permit. Where does it benefit the citizen, the interim permit process versus the, can you explain that, elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think I'm hoping that the citizen doesn't notice that this is, it won't impact them at all.
Well, it won't, because if you got this thing on if you got an interim use permit, possibly, and that's why I'm talking with you, and you die, and you want to leave that property with family, okay? What do you do then? Burn the house down?
Well, we're not talking about houses.
Well, okay.
That's not on the list.
Okay.
So it's we're talking about temporary uses. So we're talking about things that we have been. The current practice is to attach a condition, like manufactured homes for healthcare, for example. Sure. That the idea there'd be a condition that says once the use is expired, the manufactured home has to be removed. They can always come back in if they want to use that for some other purpose. Okay, so they can come in at that time. They can apply for a change of use permit to. I mean, we've had people change uses to allow that to be a storage, structure, and they've filled it with whatever. We've had them come in and permit it as a primary dwelling later on, and at that time, then it becomes no longer for healthcare; it becomes for some other use, and then that's permitted, through our normal process. So it's it's not like if something changes that they can't come in through a normal process and change that use or permit it normally. But if it's specifically for those temporary uses in the ordinance, then it would be through the interim use permit process instead of attaching conditions limiting that the duration of it.
Yeah.
I'll hold my discussion points or questions until you're finished with your presentation. Are you finished?
Pretty close. You'll do a couple more slides and.
Yeah, okay.
Does anybody else, is it all right if I run through? So, discussion and question. I guess that was closer than I thought.
There you go, Don.
All I wanted to, the rest of the conversation that I wanted to leave was just that, is just to go through the ordinance itself, if you have it in front of you, and point out the specific pieces that are proposed. Chapter 5.5 is the administration piece. So that's where the two are combined. The underlined, the new language is listed. It's pretty brief and simple. Establishing the interim use, and then the rest of the conditional use process would pertain to that as well. And then it gets into the specific districts and the temporary uses. And the way that we got to the list of uses for temporary uses in each district was just to go through what was already listed as a conditional use and pull over the temporary uses into the interim uses. So that's how we got to that point. Otherwise.
We're in discussion and questions now.
Discussion and questions.
What's the genesis of all this? Where's it coming from? I mean, is there some clamoring amongst the public to get this done, or can you come with 1,000 signatures asking for it before we go to a public hearing, or
Council?
or is this generated?
Donnie, council would like to answer your question.
There's a couple of places that this is coming from, not only the county board, which has directed staff to put this together, but a number of trainings that we've gone to recently relating to land use have specifically been teaching we have to have both interim uses and conditional uses because the law has changed in that it doesn't like having sunset clauses on conditional uses because those are designed to be more permanent in nature. They want to have them separated out and have interim uses with some kind of an end date and conditional uses to be the more permanent structures.
Where have we ran into problems?
We have not, others have.
Okay.
No, I think back during the sand mining issues, I remember Marcia Ward being a proponent of, I think when you asked for where it came from, that was the first time I heard of it, was Marcia Ward.
It did pop up there, yeah.
Wanted us to look into it. So like with land disturbances, Lou, would it be fair to assume that many times you ask for a land disturbance, you've done your project, now it's finished, and for that to be a conditional use permit into perpetuity really leaves it on our records for planning to kind of have to go back and babysit forever, but once it's done, it's done. It should be able to get an interim use permit, get the land alteration done, and move on and not have it be perpetually bogging down our staff to have to go back and review again. Or something like Richard, you asked why somebody would want it to sunset. If you're the first one, an asphalt mixing facility, if you might be more likely to get support from the community if they know it's temporary versus, okay, it's going to be there forever. There's a project that needs to happen. This can fill the need in the community, serve the purpose, and when it's done, it's going to expire. The applicant would be more likely to get the permit. It's going to
Then
to do it forever for something that's temporary. Why?
Then just make it a condition on the conditional use permit with an expiration date, and
I can't legally advise you to do that.
that's fine. This goes way beyond anything we need to get into. And it's going to change contractual relationships. It gets into contract law. It's going to change banking considerations for every conditional use permit that comes through as an interim use. We have enough problem with people. We heard one tonight. They had to go with an 8-acre parcel to be able to figure out a way to build a house and continue with the family farm. We don't need to be putting all kinds of further restrictions such as this in our ordinance.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just have a couple of questions and then maybe a comment. I noticed on page 63 of our packet, number 9 was crossed out. It says establishing a time period for the conditional use. Obviously, this would be an interim use, not a conditional use, but is that not where you would do that then? Is that why that was crossed out, or what was
Right,
this?
that would just be, because that's currently under conditional uses, right? And
Yeah.
so this would be operating, taking that process and moving it from there over to the interim use process.
So establishing a time period would be one of the things that are in an
It's
interim
inherent
use.
in the interim use.
Gotcha. Okay. Then the second thing is, one thing that I'd like to see on there is hours of operation as a condition for an interim use. I don't see it here. Is there a reason it's not there?
Hours of operation would still be something I think would be appropriate as a condition.
Okay.
To be attached to an interim use permit.
Okay. So it could be, you're not limited to this list of things. Okay.
Right. The conditions would still be the same as a conditional use permit. Anything that comes up in the process that you wanted to address could be handled that way.
Okay. And I guess just in general, what we're doing here is a construct. We're just creating a framework that we may or may not want to implement. There's nothing that says we have to make something an interim versus a CUP unless the law requires it. Okay? So we're not saying everything is going to be an interim use.
If the law requires it, we don't need this.
We actually do need it.
No, we don't.
Yes, we do.
So I'm going to step right in between both of you. I don't see it as creating more restrictions. I see it as being more user-friendly to the applicant. They come in and which is the permit they want to apply for. And we're not telling them which one. We're not telling you have to have a conditional use. We're not telling you have to have an interim. You decide what fits you. If you decide that your business is temporary and you'd be better served and the community would be more behind you if you only need to operate for 3 years and you can get the interim use permit and economy can be driven and commerce can happen because we can get the permit. We're providing an additional service to the constituent, not telling them what they have to have.
There's no statute that prohibits us from putting a date as a condition on a conditional use permit. There's nothing to prohibit that.
Counsel?
That's not my understanding. Statute perhaps, but my understanding is that there is law out there that it does suggest that you cannot put something. I've got a note that I will be looking at that and find that law, because that's what we've been taught at the research.
How about some statute and case law in that place?
I will look into that.
Okay, any other questions or comments? For Lou?
I'd just say, just a reply to Don, is some of his concerns are valid if you were, especially if you were to have permanent uses that were not temporary under the interim use side of things, like the solar arrays, community solar. There have been, I looked at some language and discussion about some problems that the industry has with that, having solar, community solar as an interim use because of financing reasons and because of not being guaranteed long-term investment, just because the investment's so high. And really, solar, I think those types of facilities are really not a temporary use. I mean, you're talking about 25 to 35 years, at which time they're probably going to want to be upgrading and continuing on in some way. So yeah, I think that absolutely a concern for uses that are not temporary. So
I would want to see the Realtors Association and other nonprofits weigh in on this that have interest in real estate.
Won't they have an opportunity? We're not.
Yeah. No, public hearing's too late for that to happen. Bring them in before we make a decision to go to public hearing.
Eric.
The only thing I'd add to this is the last number of years, we're starting to get more inquiries from attorneys that are doing abstract and title checks. They're basically preparing them for transfer, and there's been some instances where there's conditional use permits that were rather ancient and they wanted to vanquish them, and essentially called the county to actually try to get that removed because they were temporary in nature, but yet they are permanent and they're recorded and they run with the land. And essentially, I know attorneys are struggling with some of these old CUPs to try to vanquish them once and for all, because the question was, can they do that at the county level? Yeah, you know, I was really at a loss giving them any advice to say, well, you can, you know, the process for revoking a conditional use permit is the same as getting one, but to come back on a 35-year-old CUP to have a public hearing, it just seems really awkward. And in another instance, there was a case where a township had their own zoning and they issued a conditional use permit, and they had a timeline that was only supposed to be for about 9 months or so many cubic yards. And that clearly expired, but in that case, they were trying to pursue that as a loophole for a frac sand mine. And I had to legally defend that to say that that for all practical purposes, that CUP doesn't exist. It sure would have been nice, you know, to make it more clean and simple and have it vanquished in the form of an interim use before it got to that far.
That sort of concern can be addressed through legislation and statute, that if there is no longer the landowner no longer wants the CUP to be enforced, that can be done with statute.
I must not quite be understanding where you're coming from, Don. Say whatever uses that are on this list, they can either still receive a conditional use permit if that's how the person wants to approach it, right? Or they can ask for an interim. If it's a concrete asphalt plant or an extraction pit, doesn't the applicant still have the option to say, I want a CUP or I want to apply for an interim?
No, it would have to go through the interim use permit if it was listed under interim use. It won't be listed under both. But if there's another, you know, you'd have to look at the conditional use permit, what's listed under there. And if there's something under there that they can apply for, they can choose to go that way.
So a concrete, you could never have a concrete plant anymore that would be a CUP?
Not a temporary hot mix plant, no. And
okay, so I'm just saying.
An industrial use that is like a
permanent concrete plant,
like the one out in Goodview.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be handled in the appropriate district under a conditional use permit.
Except if the ordinance changes.
Eugene?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's always.
To that particular point, when you
I
started
don't
the
think
conversation.
I'm not understanding it.
No, when Lou started, he said that there were 3 ways that we could write our zoning ordinance. And the 3 are, the 3 are a date or an event, or if you change the zoning regulations. However, that is not, he did not write this ordinance isn't written to include the 3rd option. And I'm thinking that this body probably doesn't want the 3rd option in there.
Yeah, you could write out the zoning ordinance changing piece. You know, that if the zoning ordinance changes, that it would continue until whatever date was or event was in the permit.
Yeah, because you don't specify the ordinance change in the language.
In the language, no, it is in the definition. So if we didn't want to have that, we would want to remove that from the definition.
But we certainly could.
Don. Commissioner Jacob, any petitioner can ask that there be a termination date put as a condition on his conditional use permit. He doesn't need an interim permit to do that.
Staff or
we're going to see the case law and the statute and case law.
So I mean, I think that's what I'm gathering here is that we've got that request for a little bit more research to come back next month with some case law.
Realtors,
bankers,
attorneys, anybody that should be a partner in this, not just 7 or 9 of us in the county board.
Yeah.
What about Jay Squires or somebody like that? I mean, he could probably, I don't know. Just a thought.
Stephanie was going to look into some case law and the attorney side of things, and we can discuss how we're going to tackle some of the other items.
Is there anything else that you would like to have them research before our next planning commission meeting?
Top of my head, what do you think?
Steve?
Well, it changes how whether I support it or not, if it can only be one or the other. If it's a concrete plant or any of these items listed, they had been CUPs, can we still have them be listed under both? And the applicant can decide if they want to obtain an interim use permit or whether they want to obtain a permanent?
We can look into it and see what the guidance is on it. I've seen it written that way in other counties. You know, there are other ways that they've
support
written
that, but if we're taking their option away to make it a permanent land use that runs with their property, and that's what they want to do, then I would have a hard time supporting it.
Yeah, it all depends on the nature of the permit. So if it's a temporary use, it's not going to fit under those items anyways and as a conditional use. Whether it's in conditional or interim, it's still listed as a temporary use. Currently, it's under conditional.
I looked at the zoning ordinance and I compared them one by one, and I marked the ones that were different. And it isn't really exactly what you've just said. So for my comparison, these were added, the rest were the same.
Yeah, but now you can't get if we go to this, you can't get a mining.
See, if it's still listed under, so I think I heard you say that if it's listed under interim, it is no longer going to be listed under,
Conditional.
except you don't show us the strikeouts from the conditional.
Right, all those that are there as added to interim would be struck out under conditional.
Maybe we need to see that then.
Yeah, so you could not get a permit for a mine anymore that runs with the land.
Right, at the end of the mining, it would expire. When the mining is.
And some companies might very well want to invest in the property to buy it for mining purposes into perpetuity. So I was supportive of it when I thought the applicant could go either route, but if it becomes that you're taking it away from the ability to get a conditional use permit on it, then it'd be hard. All these almost would be hard for me to support, because if that's what I want to be accommodating of the constituent, not.
Mr. Chairman, in my view, it would be way premature of us to make any sort of decision on this tonight, and it's getting late.
And I have a headache.
Will you entertain a motion to adjourn?
Do we need to table this business first?
Yeah, for the record, we're not looking for any kind of action tonight. So if we're done with discussion, we'll take what we've heard and the comments and see what we can do and bring it back next month.
All right, I will, excuse me.
Just one quick comment. I'll take the time, council's doing research and they'll do a great job. I'll take the time to reach out to some counterparts with other counties that have adopted the IUP and have used it for a couple of years to see, how it's shaking out, what the usefulness is, if it really is another toolbox in their planning commission's, set of tools, or what some of the pitfalls might have been. It could be that they wish they had restricted the use and gone into it more modestly. There are some things that we issue CUPs on for festivals. Family Night in the Farm comes to mind. That should obviously be an interim use kind of thing, but yet we need to have the permitting for insurance purposes and safety for, group festivals. But should that go on in perpetuity? Of course not. So, it could be a tool, but it's way preliminary, as all of us, realize in the discussions, and we'll do whatever we can to bring back more information, whatever you like.
One thing I just add quick too is, it might be an ability to add things too that typically would not be allowed, especially the ag district. Just wanted to point out 10, that temporary small business. That was, I remember that in 1995, 96. It was not a fit for the ag district when it wasn't an ag-orientated business. We wrote into the ordinance at that time a temporary small business category, which said 5 years. You're allowed 5 years. We had a few people that came forward to do that. And what the intent was to give them a trial of 5 years to see if it was basically a business incubator to try to see if the business plan that they had would take off, because they're every intent to maybe expand or grow and maybe go to a city or an area that would need, services to provide that. But the county at that time wanted to actually have categories to allow something that would not typically be allowed in the ag district. So, you're talking about kind of restrictions, but then again, it could be used as something as an opportunity to actually add items in there that typically would not be allowed in the district too, if you had some strings attached like time limits or conditions. So, I just wanted to throw that in too.
My headache's getting worse.
Just to maybe this will be the last one, but my gut tells me, and personality tells me, that I want to give the citizenry every flexibility, okay? Every flexibility. They're the ones that make the rules. If there is anything in here that adds flexibility, that's a great thing. Okay, I will support that. But if we have to take away from Peter to give to Sammy over here, I'm not going to like that much. Okay, so I don't know why they can't run concurrently.
Mm-hmm.
Every darn thing that we'd ever give a conditional use permit, do it for interim. And if somebody wants it interim, let it go. But if you want the conditional, if it's allowable anywhere in this country or on this planet, we should be able to apply for conditional. I'm getting old enough, I don't plan on applying for anything.
Now we make a motion to close the meeting.
Honey, is
Move to adjourn.
okay. Thank you. Is there a second?
He already did.
Okay, we got several seconds. All those in favor? Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I forgot that. Richard, do we have a Board of Adjustment update?
There was no Board of Adjustment meeting for the last 2 months, so
All right.
0.
Steve.
County Board approved the Erickson dog kennels.
Okay.
What was on our last agenda? It was approved on consent business.
All right.
Richard Water?
Now we can go to the motion to adjourn, right?
Yep.
All right. All those in favor of adjourning this meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.